that you're with us this evening. Tonight, as we get going, let's see, it's always good to kind of shout out to each other so that you can obviously connect to each other as well. So I want you to feel free to do that as we move forward. But mostly I want you to just be with the presentation tonight and let the art kind of guide you in your own reflections of what this night, Good Friday, the last night of Jesus' physical life, and the beginning of resurrected life. You know, when Jesus moves from being the historical Jesus to the Christ figure that continues to inform our lives today, that moment in time, that transition happens tonight. So with that, I'll invite you to enjoy this presentation by Martin Morley, our teens, and Cheryl, our teen coordinator as well.
The death of Christ on the cross, also called the crucifixion. People have many different ideas about what the crucifixion means to them. And some of these people are visual artists. And over the past several centuries, they have shown how they feel about the crucifixion and what it means to them through their work through visual arts. Today, we're going to take a look at some of those artists' works, and some of us will be commenting on what we see in the art, how it makes us feel, some things that are interesting about the art to us. My name is Martin Morley. I'm the Director of Worship and Music here at Our Savior's Lutheran Church in Lafayette, California. And I am joined today by a distinguished panel of art lovers. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, starting with my staff colleague. Cheryl?
Everyone, my name is Cheryl Johnson, and for those of you I haven't had the opportunity to meet, it's been such a pleasure this year to get to know your church and to work with the high schoolers. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ, and really excited to continue my work with the high schoolers here at the church. I think I'll pass over now to Natalie.
Hi, my name is Natalie. I'm in 9th grade at San Ramon Valley High School.
Hi, my name is Ella. I'm a junior at Acalanes.
Hi, my name's Kira. I'm a senior at Campo.
Thank you, everyone. And now we're going to take a look at some of this art. I'll get a screen share going here. Most of the art that we'll be looking at today is from the 20th and 21st centuries, but we're going to begin with one that is very classic that a lot of people are familiar with. Christ on the Cross by the Dutch artist Rembrandt from the 17th century. Very striking portrayal of Christ's suffering. Ella, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I think the thing that kind of stands out to me with this piece of art is that I think it's everyone's like first image when they think of what Christ looks like. So I think this one isn't very shocking or isn't very new, because I feel like this is what most people think of when they think of Christ.
I think you're right about that. Natalie or Kira, any comments?
I find it like the interesting how they had the lighting and the painting, like more focusing on Christ, which obviously it should be in the if the background's just blank. But I found it interesting how they made it so it really draws your eye to him.
You know, that's a great point. The Bible tells us that it was a very dark day, even though it was the middle of the afternoon. So you can see that in the background, but it almost looks like there's a spotlight on Christ, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes you wonder maybe where that light is coming from, if it's some sort of ethereal glow or yeah, where that comes from. But yeah, you really see the juxtaposition of light and dark very strongly. Thanks for picking up on that.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's go to the next piece of art, which comes from a Canadian artist, Kathleen Munn. We are looking at this art now in chronological order. This piece is from 1928. We see that once again, the color palette is somewhat limited, as it was in the original Rembrandt. What else do you see here, Ella?
I think what stands out to me about this one is like the shape of the people. Everything's kind of boxy and it's like, and there's multiple people. So it kind of is showing like when he died on the cross, he didn't do it alone. He was doing it for other people and other people like felt his pain. So this one I feel like is less of like a vision of Christ, but more of what he was doing and what it symbolized.
Very good. Yes. What else do we see in here?
I really like just like the landscaping of it all with like the mountains in the back and even like the ground that like the crosses are planted on. It just seems like very like detailed, but then also like mildly like abstract. And it just kind of like makes me think a little bit.
Yeah, I really noticed the landscape as well. Like, I almost see it as like a mine or some kind of scorched earth kind of setting where it just seems like, you know, and sometimes, you know, in the description of the story, sometimes we hear about the idea of an earthquake or, you know, it's just the whole earth kind of breaking in this moment. So definitely see that brokenness reflected in the background for sure.
That's interesting that you all picked up on that. I totally agree. The background is very, very telling about the tragedy of this whole situation. Any other comments? Okay, let's move on to the next piece of art. This is a piece of art by the artist who was born in Belarus but spent most of his career in France, Marc Chagall, about 10 years after the one we just watched. Now, this is a very busy piece of art. There's a whole lot going on here. And Ella, do you have any reflections on what you see here?
I think the first thing I notice is just kind of like the color palette. Like there's like more vibrant colors. It's a lot lighter, but at the same time, you can see all the darkness based on what's like drawn. So in this one, the darkness isn't sticking out because it is physically dark, but because of what all the images like symbolize. So it shows kind of like how it was kind of a light day, but it had a lot of darkness behind it.
That's a great point. What are some of the dark things that you see going on in here? Anybody?
There's lots of fire.
There is fire.
Yeah, it seems it's hard to exactly know what all of the things are that are being depicted, but it seems like maybe there's a bit of a war scene, maybe on the bottom right, maybe it's someone with a bag. I don't know if they're supposed to be stealing, maybe. I think that the bottom left, maybe it's I don't know if it's a prisoner, perhaps, the one with a sign in front of them. But yeah, it seems like there's a lot going on.
And then there are these people in a boat. I mean, what's with that? Now, there are also people that are above Christ in the picture, and they appear to be floating. What do you suppose they might represent? Well, we have some people who are on what appears to be the ground or on a body of water next to a burning house. those who are floating above perhaps represent celestial beings. Might that not be the case? You can see that they're just as appalled at what's going on as anybody else. Any other reflections?
I think it's interesting that Jesus seems to be maybe wearing the cloth. It looks like a bit of a Jewish prayer shawl. So I think that maybe his Jewish identity is maybe being highlighted, perhaps.
You know, I hadn't noticed that, but you're absolutely right, Cheryl. Great point. One interesting thing about Chagall is that, you know, at our church, our Saviors in the sanctuary, there are 8 wonderful pieces of stained glass, and 6 of them were created by an apprentice of Marc Chagall, who worked with Chagall in Paris and then moved to California. And somehow, long before my time at the church, someone in the church contacted him and commissioned him to do our stained glass. It really is the best part of our sanctuary. Now we go to a very well-known surrealist painter, Salvador Dali, and this is called Crucifixion Corpus Hypercubicus. Kind of an unusual name and a very unusual piece of art. Who would like to comment on this first?
I mean, I'll comment on it first.
Thanks, Ella.
I think what I kind of really enjoy about this one actually is the person, I think that's one person looking up to him. I think that's something we didn't really see. I think in the other ones, it kind of seemed like everyone was either on the same level or they were above him. So I think, I'm not exactly sure what it means, but he's like above the person in this picture. And I think that symbolizes something. I'm not exactly sure what. And I also really like the checkered floors. Like, I feel like it's an odd addition, but I feel like it brings something more, and it's kind of like eerie in this photo. Even though it has like gold in it, it's still like you can tell by the background it's like an eerie scene.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned the checkered floor. That is really one of the most mysterious, inexplicable things about this painting to me. Natalie or Kira, do you have anything to say about this painting?
I also really noticed the checkered floor, and like at first it made me think of like a chess or checkers board.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it like originally made me think of. Yeah.
Yes, who do you suppose this person is who is looking up at Christ? It could be just about anybody. It appears to be a female figure, but not necessarily.
Kira, I really appreciate what you said about the game board aspect. It makes me think about how one of the historical kind of interpretations and understandings of the crucifixion is this idea of Christ's death as a war between the forces of good and evil. So the idea of a game and sort of opposing adversarial sides kind of really resonates with that interpretation of his death to me.
One thing that I think particularly stands out in this painting is that there are no nails involved. Christ appears to be just floating.
Point.
Now, Kira, I know you may need to leave at some point for work. So if you do, you don't have to let us know about that. You can just take off if you need to, but we'll hold on to you as long as we can.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next piece of art. This is by another Spanish artist, Antonio Saura. Quite different than what we've been looking at. what you see here?
I mean, it's really interesting to look at because I keep looking, trying to find like things that I can visibly like see. At first, I was like, oh, maybe, because it looks kind of like there could be an arm on the left, but that seems to be about all I can get out of it. And I think it's just really interesting because it kind of just shows like, to me, it portrays like a mess, kind of a disaster. And
Hmm.
I think that's why like it could work. And then there's the dark on the top and the light on the bottom. I think it just kind of shows that little contrast of the dark versus light, what this day actually was. Like it was kind of a mess. It was confusing. Like it was like, what's going to happen after this? Is this going to work out? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? And I think this painting just kind of portrays like confusion of like, what does this really mean? This is such a bad day, but could this also be a good thing? Like, I think that's just what this makes me think of.
Well said. It's a very confusing look at what's going on. And frankly, it's very honest because none of us really understand completely what the crucifixion was all about. Natalie, anything that you see here that is either striking or disturbing to you?
I mean, I kind of see like two people, if that makes sense. Like I see a person, I see like obviously I see the arm on what could be a cross, but then I also kind of see at the bottom like a person like kneeling down, like 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 when he fell, like as if it's like before he got to the cross.
Ah,
Yeah, that's really cool. I feel like I can kind of see that too. It's really interesting. I think the perspective aspect too is super interesting. It kind of almost seems like the viewer is like looking up from beneath in a way. I don't know.
absolutely. And, what strikes me is that it appears that Christ's face is disproportionately large and that it's really a skull.
Yeah, in some ways, are you sort of seeing that face like between the arms?
Right.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Really, really interesting.
Moving on. This is a piece of art by the British artist Norman Adams called Golden Crucifixion.
Wow.
Ella, what do you have to say about this one?
I mean, the thing that like I don't know if anyone else sees this, but I see like butterflies almost, and it appears to me at least that the like people, I think they are like standing, those also to me just kind of seem like caterpillars. Like I think they kind of seem like that, and it's like they're growing and this is what they want to be, like that's going to be their final form. So I think to me this just kind of symbolizes like everyone is kind of like equal. Even we all start out at different places, but eventually we all like come together and we all take the same end form almost. And I think this is like a really beautiful way to put the crucifixion, because this is called Golden Crucifixion. It's obviously more of a happy note. This one isn't supposed to be dark and sad. And this is almost like a good memory of that day, if you could call this day a good memory. It depends how you look at it. But I think it's a really beautiful image where like they just put it in a good light. And I think that's necessary for a lot of things. A lot of art can be very dark and disturbing, but I think it's also good to sometimes throw in a good one every once in a while.
Great observation. Natalie, anything you have to contribute? Not for this one? Okay. Ella, what you said about the butterflies is really significant, I think. One of the symbols of the resurrection is a butterfly. So this seems to say, like you said, that this is not a tragic thing, that the rest of the story has yet to be told. I worked for a church in Texas for a few years called Resurrection Lutheran Church, and its logo, because it was built on land that used to be a cotton field, was a cotton bowl with a butterfly on top, signifying the resurrection. And so that's an important part of this. It's a very hopeful piece, isn't it? And Ella, I'm glad you picked up on that. Cheryl, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I completely concur. I think that that's a really cool interpretation. And just this idea that even, that I think that that metaphor of, I love the caterpillars. I didn't notice the people as caterpillars before myself, but that's really cool to imagine that, what might seem when we see a caterpillar kind of going into a cocoon, we might think it's dead, just like, we thought Jesus was dead and gone forever, but perhaps it's just a transformation and there's a new life coming. So yeah, I think that that's really neat to see. And now I see those caterpillars there too. So thank you for sharing that.
I would just like to add one more thing that I just noticed.
Sure.
The person, I guess, in the blue dress, you can see them reaching their arms out. And then while looking at that, I actually noticed all of the other kind of rays that appear to be throughout the whole painting. And I think that's just another way to like symbolize like the light is coming, like the sun is rising, things will get better. And I just thought that was another interesting thing to add.
That's beautiful.
Well, Ella, you've really helped me appreciate this painting more. Thank you for your insights. And we have one last painting to look at. And this is the one from the 21st century, another British artist, this time Stephen McGowan. This is called Constellation Crucifixion. And like the Chagall, there's a lot going on here. Cheryl, any initial reflections?
Yeah, I love that. I love it. I love the kind of cosmic element, the idea that sort of the suffering of Christ being this kind of cosmic event where, the stars and the moon and maybe even northern lights and fire. There's just so much perhaps that could be read into this. So yeah, I love that connection, that the sort of suffering of Christ can be seen manifest perhaps in other realms as well.
Ella?
What I really like about this one is that, to me at least, it doesn't appear that he's on the ground. And like things I noticed, to me, I see like a boat in the water underneath him. Like, so it appears if almost he's over the ocean, like he's not on the ground. And I see like, it appears that there's like a little crown on top of his head almost with like, and I think that was intentional. I don't think that was just another splatter with the rest of it. So it's like what it says about like him. He's not on the ground. He's floating almost. He has a crown. The stars are above him. And then also, I think it's really interesting that there's I see like a shadow figure, kind of not exactly looking at him though. It doesn't appear to be looking at him. So it's like, I'm not exactly sure what that symbolizes. Is that what he comes back as, what he was before he left? Like, or is that a bystander? Just like peering out, looking at the view, like wondering what's going to come next. I think the confusion with this is like you can kind of interpret that however you would like to. And I think that's really nice about this piece.
I agree. It's open to a lot of different interpretations. Natalie, what do you think that thing is on top?
On top, like with the eye and the stars around it. Is that what you're doing?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So you see an eye with stars surrounding.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen it, but I don't know what it's called. Like I feel like I've seen it in our house before. That eye symbol.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I was gonna say was I find the light very interesting again, but this time it's like diagonal, and I find what Ella was saying was like maybe a boat to her. I feel like it's a bird, and I feel like it's portraying like resurrection, like kind of like a phoenix is reborn in the fire, something like that, where like the dark part is more like the past, and then the lighter side is what is to come, the new.
Wow. Great observations. Cheryl, anything to add?
No, I think that, yeah, I just appreciate so much this conversation about art. I feel like seeing it through other people's eyes, I just noticed so many more layers. So just thank you so much for your reflections, everyone. This has been really rich.
Yes, I've really enjoyed this time too. That concludes our time together. I want to thank Natalie and Ella and Kira and Cheryl for joining me. And we wish everyone who is watching this a very meaningful Good Friday and a very joyful Easter.
All right. Well, thank you for to Martin and all of our teenagers for putting that together. That is just fantastic. I have to hop over and do some work while you're all reflecting on the different ways in which, there we go. The different ways in which artists kind of captured the essence of the crucifixion, and then all of the nuancing around hope, maybe fear, wonder, questions, angst, anger, links to past and longings for future. It was all folded into all those art pieces. So hopefully you found it a rich experience to, just simply tend to the way in which artists have tried to capture the spirit of this night that we share together. So thanks to Cheryl and Martin and our teens for bringing us that. To close this evening, I'm going to invite Sam Ledoux and Martin to come and play a piece of music for you. And this piece of music was done, I think it was composed in the 50s somewhere. It's Samuel Barbas, as I had mentioned before. It's part of his song cycle of the Hermit songs. And what they are, they grabbed and translated poetic notes that had been written in the margins of these medieval transcripts by Irish monks. And that served as the lyrics for these particular songs and the one you're going to hear tonight. I want to read the lyrics for you so that you can kind of have them in your consciousness as you hear Sam sing them this evening. And remember, this is like a 10th century Irish monk who noted these words and crafted them as he was reflecting on the crucifixion. The poem goes like this. At the cry of the first bird, they began to crucify thee, O swan. Never shall lament cease, because it was like the parting of day from night. Ah, sore was the suffering borne by the body of Mary's son, yet sorer still to him was the grief which for his sake came upon his mother. One more time. At the cry of the first bird, they began to crucify thee, O swan. Never shall lament cease, because it was like the parting of day from night. O sore was the suffering borne by the body of Mary's son, yet sorer still to him was the grief which for his sake came upon his mother. A grief all of us probably share as we wrestle with the loss of someone who tried to bring love into the world only to be met with such violence. What's to come of such a story? Enjoy this piece of music by Martin and Sam this evening.
At the cry of the first bird, they began to crucify thee. but so still to him was the grief which for his sake came upon his
What a beautiful piece to close out this evening. Kind of a, what struck me by that piece was not only obviously the suffering that was borne by Jesus in the context of his own crucifixion, but that he would also bear the suffering of those who watched him die, particularly his mother in the poetics of that song. But I think for all of us who kind of watch with despair, right, when death rules the day, and we just can't believe that it has that kind of capacity to dominate and to bring things to an end like it does. It is a painful experience, and yet at the same time, like much of the artists we saw and like the melody of that tune, there is a haunting invitation that there is also more. There's more if you can look through the suffering into maybe what is beyond that suffering. I think partly that's what Easter brings us. And I'm going to invite you to join us again, not only tomorrow night at 7 o'clock for a Easter vigil put on by the seminary and Sam Ledoux, but on Easter morn to also use, again, the poetic language of the experience of what it means to feel the regenerative power of Easter in your life, in our world, as a way of embracing Easter this particular year. So move into this evening reflective of these moments that we've shared, the artists that have guided us through this time of reflection, the voices that have lingered within us, to move us into an experience of this night of loss. And then we look forward to seeing you again on Easter morn, 9 a.m. for our Facebook live feed. And if you want to join us for our drive-in worship that day and some outdoor seating as well, with some music that we sing together and as well readings and reflections, that will happen at 11 o'clock, right on site at 1035 Carroll Lane. Thanks for being a part of tonight, and good night.